What is going on, Diesel Nation? We're excited to have you guys with us today on the Diesel Podcast. Today I've got Nick Priegnitz. He's the owner of Calibrated Power. He's going to be joining me to chat about tuning newer diesels, tuning trucks with DPFs and EGRs on them, if tuning them affects reliability, what CARB testing means or doesn't mean to be able to offer tuning, a lot of other questions. We've listened to him over the years talk about the importance of transmission tuning. I'm going to ask him about tuning the 10-speed automatics from Ford and GM and how that may help and maybe some roadblocks that they're running into. So it's going to be a great chat. Before we get to it, though, we want to encourage you guys, if you're not on our Discord, make sure and jump on. It's totally free. It's we're a little over 300 members on there. It's for our hardcore fans, people who listen to every episode, want to talk with other podcast listeners, bounce ideas around for builds, ask product questions, or an episode like this one. It came right from Discord. Somebody wanted me to chat with Nick and ask him these tuning questions. A bunch of people chimed in with their questions as well. So it's a really cool way for us to be able to connect and you to be able to influence the podcast, suggest guests and episodes, and just be able to be more informed about your diesel truck or things that you may want to do to it, and asking other people who may have gone down that same road as well. Also, if you're looking to support the podcast, you're going to find our Patreon link down below as well. There's exclusive perks that we just offer to Patreon members. There's episodes that we don't release on any of the podcast apps or YouTube. You just find them there. And it's a really cool way to be able to get feedback from you guys. And we tried to, make it as inclusive as possible with different things that you can get. So if you'd like your truck to be our podcast cover for a month, if you'd like to be an executive producer for an episode, get on-air shout-outs, tons of different things. It's all right there. And the packages start as low as $3 a month. So it's basically like a coffee once a month. So we look forward to seeing you guys there and hearing your feedback and including you more into the podcast. All right, let's get to today's episode and chatting with Nick Priegnitz from Calibrated Power about tuning new diesels. Nick, welcome to the Diesel Podcast. I know you've been on here before. It's been a couple years since we chatted. I know the whole industry and everyone's been extremely busy, working on parts, getting things out the door. And I'm really excited to be able to do an episode about emissions on tuning, the future of it, the things you guys are seeing at Calibrated Power. So we're going to have a fun conversation. Look forward to chatting with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be here. I know, like you said, it's been a couple of years, but we got plenty to talk about. So
a lot has changed. Yeah, a lot has changed, and I've been collecting these questions from listeners and things on YouTube and stuff for a while. And I kind of wanted to start for anyone who's new to these trucks is have you explained to our audience what you guys do. I know you tune the older diesels, but specifically with the newer ones, whether it's Power Stroke, Cummins, Duramax, what kind of options you guys have to be able to tune those trucks?
Yeah, like you said, I started the business quite a while ago, before the emission stuff, before 2007. So I've definitely tuned the older trucks, but certainly in the past 10 years, our niche has been tuning emissions-equipped trucks. So tuning, we've had to develop strategies to get a lot of power out of trucks cleanly, to maximize the emission systems, to really work within the overhead and the boundaries that the factory limitations as they exist on these trucks. So for your typical, late model Duramax, for instance, LMM, L5P, we are a tune-only company. So you buy a tuner from us. We would, put your truck in a situation where we can get the most extra power out of it without compromising the emission system. So we're looking for clean, reliable horsepower, something you can count on, and continue to keep that truck clean, smoke-free, and quiet.
The technology, I imagine, that you guys have to test really has probably been crucial to that versus, the old days. And I'm just making an assumption here, but, you take an old truck, you definitely know what you're doing with mapping it and ways you can push the stock equipment. But with the newer ones, you got to be careful of the DPF and how much load is on there. So I'm sure there's a lot on the testing side or R&D side that goes into producing tunes for these trucks.
Yeah, like you said, it's a much different perspective when you look at it from that angle. On the older trucks, you're really adding fuel, adding timing, adding fuel pressure. Continue to add ingredients until the thing really tells you that it doesn't want anymore. And you have to use some more sensitive instruments when you're dealing with the emissions-equipped trucks. Your testing has to take a longer angle. So we're looking to drive the trucks for a year, 2 years, sometimes to get regen frequency data. We're using wideband O2 sensors, spectrometers to look at opacity in the exhaust. trying to, get the instruments that are important to see if the truck is happy with the emission system on it, right? So we don't want to push the thing into the red just to make every last ounce of horsepower. We're looking to, maybe go 80, 85% so that we can maintain that reliability. So, really looking at the thermal limits, looking at all the boundaries that the factory has in place, and then seeing, how far can we push these things and what sensors do we have in place to make sure things are safe.
Is the factory emissions framework that you have to work in, does it provide a lot of growth that you can have with tuning, say taking a stock L5P or 6.7 Cummins or Power Stroke? How much power are you able to get out of them, safely within the framework of the DPF and EGTs and everything else that you're looking at?
Yeah. So it varies by brand, and I'll kind of run you through the big three, just the way I see it. Your typical Cummins will dyno 340, 350 to the tires, late model Cummins 13 plus. With our tuning, you can expect to see between 480 and 490 to the rear wheels. Now understand that you can't use that 480, 490 continuously, but it is available for 15 to 20 seconds, and then we'll start to pull back, as you inch toward the thermal boundaries of the engine. For the Power Stroke, typically dyno in the high threes, the late model 15 to 19 Power Stroke. Same thing with the 20, really. 20 on the dyno a little bit higher, and then we're looking at 580 to 590 to the tire on a max effort emissions equipped file. So similar deal, right? We're adding power within the overhead constraints of the engine, and then as soon as we see we're running out of air or running out of ability to remove the heat from the system, then we start to taper the fueling back and keep the engine happy. And then the Duramax is similar, 400 and low 400s, 405, 407 to the tire on an L5P, and then with a tune on it, you can see as much as 530 to 550 to the wheel, depending on altitude and environmental conditions.
I've seen some videos that you guys have done talking about transmission tuning. I wanted to ask you how that goes hand in hand with doing the engine to be able to protect, whether it's a 6-speed or a 10-speed or, which, depending which model it is. How does the transmission side factor into how much you're able to do with these trucks from a reliability standpoint, I guess I would say?
Yeah. Well, anybody who's had an LB7 or an early model Duramax knows that the transmission is usually the first thing that, would give you its walking papers when you start to reach the limit of the turbocharger or really put a big tune on the truck. And it was always kind of, how much can I cheat this thing, not let it shift from 4 to 5 or something like that. These later model trucks, now that they put out so much power stock, they have higher line pressure, more clutches, excuse me, basically upgraded transmission to handle that higher factory capacity stock. But still, everything has its limits. So when we go to tune the transmission in any of the big three, we're looking at getting the torque converter locked up under load. So we want to be able to transfer that torque, we want to transfer that power to the rear tires. We're looking at improving the shift firmness if possible. We're looking at raising the line pressure so we get additional clamping force to make sure we don't get slip in the transmission, unnecessary slip or more slip than stock if we can help it. So most of these trucks with a transmission tune will hold the power levels that I was talking to you about earlier. And it's really when you go beyond those power levels that you start to get into the weeds with hard parts.
Are you guys finding that the 10-speed Ford and Allison transmission hold up pretty well, or are those guys going to kind of be in the same situation as the rest of the trucks where you're looking at a built unit if you really want to push it?
Yeah. Allow me to air my grievances here. The Ford has done a fantastic job with the 10-speed transmission, and a lot of that comes from our ability to map it and tune it, and it's really one of my favorite transmissions, honestly. However, in the Duramax platform, we cannot tune it, and therefore it's really a pain in my butt. It holds the power pretty decently in the Duramax up to that 530, 550 number, but the shift quality just is not where I want it to be. I'm really disappointed with the performance of that 10-speed in the 2020 plus trucks, just as it relates to what people expect from our tuning. Our tuning, typically we shoot for an OEM feel, so we really want that truck to feel as it does stock, with the extra power, of course, right? Like an OEM calibrator went through and made everything work. the 10 speed on the Duramax is just a little frustrating at this point, but I hold out for it. I think we're going to get there, just because the Ford, with tuning does such a great job. Additional line pressure, lockup strategy, all that stuff. I mean, it's one of my favorites.
The drivability is what I hear about a lot when people are, they get a newer truck or it's just coming out of warranty and now they want to do stuff to it. They always ask with these upgrades, I still want the drivability of daily driving or towing. And so I think it's really something cool that you mentioned there as far as trying to keep that OEM type of feel or that response that's there. That's what people are going to feel, all the time versus that 10 to 15 second full throttle run.
Yeah, nobody wants to trade off, extra firm shifts or anything like that, for a truck that can make a quarter mile, a tenth of a second faster, right? We want the truck to shift and perform just like it does during normal driving, as it was stock. And then as you lean into the throttle, you want it to get a little bit firmer and let you know it's there. And then, as you continue to get after it, so on and so forth, right? But the modern tuning is you got so much control there. It's really a nice piece.
I think one of the really important parts, I've been paying attention to diesels for, gosh, I don't know, maybe 10, 12, 13 years. And early on in tuning, there were tons of choices. I could go online, find a bunch of different places, and somebody could have learned the software, just made tunes and they sell them. And what is drastically changed, I think, with the emissions on stuff is you have to have testing or just to be able to show, kind of like with turbos and injectors. And we see it a lot in the industry where these companies are going and doing CARB testing or EPA type testing to make sure the aftermarket product that they offer can be used in 49 states or 50 states. And I wanted to ask you about the tuning side of that is what have you guys done and gone through and tested to be able to get that, I don't want to say approval, but just that testing to be able to say, hey, if you live in California or you live in one of the other 49 states, you can run this tuning package that we have.
Yeah. It's ironic that you say not that approval, because CARB specifically outlines that it is not an approval. But we spent over the past 2 or 3 years, we've tested 5 of our products. We've got approvals on the Duramax, and we've got approvals pending on the others. It's just a long administrative process. But really, our goal is to design the calibration in a way that during normal drive cycles, during basically everything you'd normally use the truck for, the emissions output for all 5 gases and for soot do not exceed the standard. And so the standard is set forth by EPA. Also, as a bonus, we're trying not to exceed and go under the baseline if we can. So there's certain things you can do in the tune to make the truck run cleaner. There's certain things you can do in the tune to work around these boundaries. But it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time and energy and investment of resources to design a cal and to test it and to get yourself in a position where you feel confident that you can send this truck off to SEMA Garage or whoever's doing the testing and say, okay, I'm going to spend $15,000-$20,000 with these guys, and I get this one shot. And if I don't, it's basically an expense and it's gone. But if it works out, you have that executive order, that CARB, and then all of a sudden everybody wants to play ball with you. So that makes it a real hurdle for the new guys, the guys who maybe don't have as much capital in the game or who are just starting out or whatever. It's a big barrier to entry for those younger or smaller tuning shops.
I think where it all converges in a way is there's a lot of areas that are either adopting that California model or just states that are going towards that, where people now are more, they ask that question. They say, hey, does this have testing? Because I if I have to get a smog check or emissions test, I don't want to fail. And so I think the truck owners out there are definitely more in tune with asking that question. And I'm sure, preparing for something like that, to have something tested, that's where all that R&D and testing I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast kind of comes into play. So you have a pretty good idea, where your product or where your tuning is going to be at. So, not that it's guaranteed you pass, but you're probably pretty sure, hey, we're within the framework of what we need.
Yeah. I mean, you got to know that you're close, before you go in and commit to that test. But, like you said, there's so many external forces now on a business owner like me, right? I don't just have the EPA, wanting me to get this done. I have CARB, of course. There's also the Ministry of the Environment in Canada. There's all these distributors, or the XDPs, the Thoroughbreds, the Alligators, right? The bigger the diesel performance power products. Like, you have these large distributors or wholesalers or whatever you want to call them, right? The big internet guys, and they're not going to carry your product moving forward if you can't get that EO. And that's because the pressure has been put on them by the EPA. So, everybody's feeling that stone around their neck, right? And there's a lot of pressure to change in the industry. And so, it might not be that you have emissions testing in your neck of the woods, or that, maybe you live in Wyoming and, this totally feels like this situation you shouldn't be in.
Yeah.
But just understand the people you're working with on the phone, the internet sales guys, whoever you're working with to get your truck where you want it to be, everybody's got to play within this framework. Otherwise, they're not allowed to operate anymore. And so there goes the industry, right? So if you want the industry to live, this is really the way to do it forward. I hate to work off that fear model. I really enjoy the challenge of tuning emissions equipped trucks. I think it's fun. I like clean, quiet stuff. Maybe I'm an oddball in this industry, but I like to go fast and I like it clean and quiet. So that's just me.
Yeah, I think that it's just been a major theme, and it's been very interesting to cover it over the years, is to see how it's changed. And there's a common question we get, and it's from somebody who doesn't own a diesel, and so they have some money set aside, and they're looking at which one to buy, and they're either looking pre 2007, or some of them aren't even shying away from the new ones, but they ask this next question, which is, I love the performance side of it. Maybe they don't tow a lot, but they want to be able to take it to the track or sled pull with it. And I kind of wanted to get into that space of this. Is where do you see the performance side of emissions equipped diesels going? And I know there's things that you guys have done as a company with different events and showcasing what it can do, but are we going to see that 650, 700 horsepower emissions equipped truck that you can take to 50 states or 49 states, or what do you envision with that?
Yeah. Do I see that there will be emissions on a huge surge in diesel performance emissions on clean trucks and sled pulls and drag racing and all that stuff? It'd be neat to have some classes, but I'm not kidding myself by saying that next year we're going to have a bunch of emissions equipped trucks, drag racing and sled pulling. I have campaigned two vehicles, really. So one we called Clean Sweep, which was a 2012 LML that we ran for a season, work stock sled pulling, which was very competitive at 580, 620. I think by the end of the season, we were about 6.25 horsepower. Had a stealth turbo on it, and upgraded pump, and factory emissions equipment. It was the only clean truck on the track. It was just kind of fun to go out there and turn heads. It got a lot of conversations started. A lot of people had a lot of negative things to say about the lack of smoke and the lack of sound, and I get that. You come there for a show, but it is also still neat to see that the truck that basically looks stock was winning these classes. So we had a lot of fun with that one. Similarly, the 2017 Ford regular cab that we just built a campaign at, I want to say UCC, with the all truck King of the Streets all truck challenge. So that's a same 625, 650 horse truck, depending on who's dyno, I guess, at the not to cause drama, right? But at the King of the Streets, I think it dynoed 770 or 760. Again, a stealth turbo truck with a pump. Great running truck. I got the chance to pull it in the same class as the work stock guys at the event, and I think I was in third place out of 20 something trucks, and they were trucks that came for cash. Like, it wasn't a bunch of bullshit trucks. They were some good running trucks. So I think absolutely you can be competitive. Late model trucks are very competitive on the sled track. They hook up well. They have great suspensions. They just seem to do really well. And with 650 horsepower, you can have a very competitive sled pulling truck and still have the emissions on it, if that's what you want to do. I'm not going to twist anybody's arm to do it, but it's definitely possible. I think once you go past 650, we start to see some other limitations. And those are in the shape of the catalytic converter, first and foremost. They're just not big enough to support over 650 horsepower reliably. So a lot of our performance side testing, we've been putting pressure sensors all through this exhaust system to really hone in and see, okay, if we're going to spend money on something for development, is it going to be a DPF? Is it going to be an SCR? Is it going to be a catalyst? Is it going to be a downpipe? What is it, right? And the word to the wise out there, any industry guys listening, high flow cats, definitely the next needed product for a lot of these trucks if you want to go clean.
I think that's where, like, what you guys have done with the 2012 Duramax and with the Ford Power Stroke is you kind of reaching that limit of what can be done with some of these components, and it's like, okay, well, what's the next thing we need? And I'm sure there's going to be a whole bunch of other stuff after that, but as they progressively get pushed, there's kind of a framework if you want to build a truck or have fun with something at the track, how you can do it. Versus there's so many frustrated newer truck owners that I've heard from over the years where they're like, there's not a lot for my truck. There's something I can pick up 70-80 horse with and maybe get an air intake, but there's not a lot like my 5.9 or my LB7. And so it's something that's really encouraging to me. And what I like to see is with companies that are out there producing these products to be able to say, we're not where we were on the pre-07 trucks, but we're slowly getting there. There's something you can do to be able to improve the drivability or performance if that's what you want to use your truck for.
Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Competition drives innovation. So if we want those trucks to be able to make more power and to be reliable and to last, and you want good products for those trucks, the best thing that the industry can do is make a competitive class for those trucks, because it will absolutely drive, smart people who are motivated, who are ambitious, who have a chip on their shoulder, which are usually the best ones for making new products, to do that. And so, until we have people who want to compete in those classes, you're going to see, a very slow trickle of 650 plus horsepower parts for emissions equipped trucks until you get a class full of guys who want to beat each other.
I think it's so crucial though to being able to draw in new diesel enthusiasts. Like when I got into trucks, gosh, it was 2008, and I went to an event, and it was Dimitri, and he was racing Clint from ATS. And I'm just sitting in the stands watching, these trucks, and I think they ran 10s, which was really quick back then. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to, have the cash at that time to build 1,000 or 1,200 horsepower truck, but it didn't stop me from going to a dealership and buying a new truck and saying, hey, as I can afford it, I'm going to do these upgrades and do these things. And so I think, there is that element of, the performance that people like. They like to see the smoke. They like the sound. And while that might not be there on the new ones, some people just want to go fast. Some people just want to hit a dyno number. Some people just want a track time. And it's encouraging to be able to, I think, pull those people in, which is especially what like All Truck Challenge did, is be able to say, hey, these are street trucks. This is what they can do. They're operating within the framework of, the year or the era that they're in. And you can go do this. And I think that opens it up to say, hey, maybe I will do this turbocharger. Maybe I will do these injectors and this tuning. And I will invest in a built transmission and traction bars and all the other things that are involved in the diesel aftermarket industry.
Yeah. I mean, people want to see their own trucks or their friends' trucks or trucks that they're familiar with driving. They want to make that connection from street truck to race truck.
Yeah.
And if you continue to campaign 2002, 2006 trucks, guys are buying 2022s. I mean, things get stale,
Yeah.
And so it's important to really, even though those trucks are slower, the newer trucks, that's life. They're going to get faster. They're going to be cooler. Like you said, it was cool to watch 2 10-second trucks run because you knew the story.
Yeah.
Right. It's still cool to watch 2 10-second trucks run because, these are going to be the first emissions equipped 10-second trucks to do it. And so that's still a cool story.
Well, it's so hard if you're in the truck market to look back at, say, like a third gen Ram, which that was my first one. But I can't kid anyone and say the interior and the seats and everything else were fantastic, compared to a 2021 or 2020. They're light years different. And, the age that I'm at, I'd rather have those creature comforts. I'd rather have the nice things that are in any of the big three trucks. And so there's definitely that kind of difference of, do I really want to step back 15 years in technology and hear my dash, or door panels rattle, or just all the different things every truck has? And they're like, no, I want this new one. There's a lot of technology in them and different things you want as somebody daily driving a vehicle.
Yeah. You know it. I mean, that's, I have a few high horsepower trucks in my shop, and I drive either a 2.8 or a 500 horsepower L5P because they got heated steering wheels.
Yeah.
And it's really nice to have the Bluetooth connection, right? Like, going fast is fun, but you got to be comfortable too. And that's funny.
I had a couple of questions from some of our listeners, and it pertains to the emissions side of it. Is regardless of whether which one of the big three it is, if they do emissions on tuning, should they expect more regens than they did stock, or what's the relationship between adding this power and the regens they're going to see?
So adding the power is not necessarily going to increase the regen frequency. What increases the regen frequency is the amount of soot that you're actively passing through the system. And really, the soot load is tied to the output of the vehicle. So soot load basically directly tied to the horsepower output. Maybe not always in a linear line, but the two are correlated closely. So what I would say is that, yes, you tune the truck. If you drive it the same way you drove your stock truck, you should expect no change in regen frequency. If you drive it very aggressively, let's say you have 25% more available output, and you're consistently driving it in that 25%, more output, you should expect your regen frequency to correspondingly shorten up. So it basically, think about how much fuel you're using, and that's how much regen frequency you're going to see.
Well, I imagine when a lot of your customers get new tuning and you have an extra 130 horsepower on tap, you're probably going to use it for a little bit. You're gonna enjoy the extra power, and I could see that being a direct relationship there.
There's always that honeymoon phase, a new guy, new customer gets the tune, gets the truck, and we expect that. We usually tell guys, don't pay attention to your mileage for the first month. Like, that's you getting used to the truck. It's normal. But as you start to settle in, you'll start to look at your gauges, look at your frequencies, understand how you drive the truck, and then things should normalize. And if they don't, that's the time where it's worth a phone call.
You had mentioned earlier in the podcast, when you're working on tuning and doing the research, is drive the truck for a year or two. And the next question related to, okay, if I have my emissions on tuning, does it negatively affect any of the components on the truck, like the DPF, or am I going to see any reliability issues? Not necessarily right away, but in 100,000 miles, 200,000 miles.
So a lot of those components, they're on the frequency, right? So how many regens are you seeing? So if you're consistently abusing the truck and using it really aggressively, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say, you're going to have the same number of regens and the same frequency of regens over 100,000 miles. If you have more regens more frequently over the next 100,000 miles, then I expect more system degradation than stock. That's life. Most people understand that. If you're, occasionally, what it boils down to is most people, they just don't use that extra power enough to make a difference. You feel the extra torque in the pedal, but we're talking about, situations where, maybe you're 230 horsepower at low RPM, where you used to have 200 horsepower available or 150 horsepower available. So you're not pushing the truck extra hard. So you're enjoying the extra torque available, but you're not incurring more regens, and therefore you're not incurring more system degradation because of it. So you know what I'm saying? Like where you're driving a diesel, you're feeling how the pedal is in fifth or sixth gear. You know, you're rolling into the truck a little bit, but you're really not abusing it. That kind of behavior, absolutely, I encourage. Right? That's fun driving. You're getting the most out of the tune. You're getting the most out of the truck. You're probably getting better mileage than stock, and you know because you're not downshifting, you're not having to run higher RPM, and the truck's going to be just as happy as it was stock in that situation. Secondary answer to your question would be like parts damage, right? And so a lot of the parts damage that you see in diesel performance is related to heat. And so in all of our tuning with emissions equipped trucks, we are hawks on heat, right? We don't disable any thermal limits. We keep those active. We work with the systems. We do not disable them. So, you know, as you use that extra power, your truck's going to incur more heat. And as you reach what we call a thermal boundary, which is where the truck would start to defuel slightly, normally you're not even going to feel it, but you know the truck is pulling fuel back and thus pulling power in an effort to cool itself off. Those safeties are still intact. They might be tweaked slightly, but they're still intact, and they're still going to save you. You know, could be there to save your truck from turbine failure, piston failure, head gasket failure, that kind of thing.
Okay, so that's still those sort of safeguards are still built into the tuning versus, you know, in the old days, it was like you got to watch your EGT gauge or whatever electronic monitor you have and really pay attention to how long you're at 1700 degrees for.
Exactly. I mean, we know that our customers don't want to be babysitting their gauges, right? And those LB7 LLYs, they didn't come with EGT sensors, but the newer trucks, they have those things, and they have those safeties built into the operating system, so we as tuners can take advantage of them. So, you know, as the OEMs advance, we advance, and I think, you know, our customer wants a reliable truck, and therefore we're going to do everything we can to provide that.
As we wrap up 2021, head into 2022, what are some things that you guys are working on at Calibrated Power for the new year, or maybe some new challenges, or, you know, a project truck that you guys are working on for next year, something that you guys want to showcase?
It's always a challenge. New products are great when they release, but the year before is always hell. I'll start with the new products. So we've been working for probably 2 years on a 2.8 liter stealth turbocharger, which is a large market for the 2.8 guys. They're their own crowd, but we love them. We support them. We do a lot of 2.8 tuning. And so this turbocharger is designed to replace the factory unit. Can be run without any tuning. Certainly will add 30 to 40 horsepower of headroom on a guy who used to have a stock turbocharger. We see a lot of 2.8 turbo failures just because they have really thin turbine blade or compressor blades, and so the PCV system and oil system and ice and whatever else hits the turbine or compressor blades, you know, we have some issues there. So we're excited about that product. We expect to launch that somewhere around the new year. Other products that we've been really hitting hard on would be the 6.7 Ford Stealth Turbo for 15 to 19. We're working on a 20 plus unit. Also our HE351 VE. Spent a lot of time on the exhaust side of that turbocharger, having some really, really good results. Guys making big power gains on our 351 VE. We know we're not the only ones in that market, but our goal is to really, you know, set ourselves apart on that side. Cool trucks we're working on. I would say once the Stealth gets rolling for the 2020 Ford, certainly be excited to get back on that platform. Tuning it was a lot of fun, looking to make more power on that one. The 2017 Ford with the Stealth, you know, 650, 640 horsepower truck. It's all set up for the All Truck Challenge for, you know, King of the Streets. So you may see us campaign that one, sled pulling in the work stock class this year. We'll see. I think that's, you know, I'm sure I'll hang up with you, Patrick, and I'll think you dumbass, you know, you forgot something. But yeah, that's what's off the top of my head.
Is that turbocharger relationship, you know, from your customers? You know, I'm sure you get a lot of customers that call in, they get the tuning, you know, set up, and they get used to it after 6 months or 8 months or 2 months, and they think, well, I want to do something else. And once they go to that upgraded turbo, I'm sure there's a little bit more power you can, get them. But is that the relationship? Is just, hey, I want something a little better in stock. I want a little bit more power. I want better EGT control, and this product from the same company ties right into it because you've done all the testing with it. You know how these different turbos run on these different trucks with the tuning that you guys are doing. So it seems like it goes hand in hand there.
Well, there's certainly a good number of those customers that exist. I wouldn't say most, but I would say some of our tuning customers certainly make that transition in the next year, 2, 3, whatever it is, right? The second big business for us on the turbo side is that being a tuner, I really design and build our turbochargers to be friendly to tuners. And I'm not shy about sharing calibration data with other tuners who want that information or want to know how to tune that turbocharger. And I'll share a script or a tune or whatever it takes to get a guy in a situation where he feels comfortable with my turbocharger. So most of these aftermarket turbochargers, most of our stalls that we build, do they need tuning? No, I mean, they pass the CARB testing without any tuning. But, tuning certainly adds to the shine. And so anytime, we can marry those two strong knowledge bases together, to the benefit of the customer or the tuner or who's ever doing the job, making the sale, taking care of the customer, they appreciate that. So we sell a lot to dealers and other tuners and, guys who maybe aren't building their own turbochargers, but just want a tuner's attitude on it.
I just thought of one question that I didn't tell you beforehand about, so I gotta throw you a curveball here. But I have seen this pop up a little bit with the Prio 7 guys. Is they ask, hey, is there pressure that you get from the EPA or CARB or just in the industry to say, hey, I need to take this, CARB tested or EPA tested tuning and apply it to a 2006 or 2007 truck? Or is that even on the horizon or any sort of thing that, that you guys work on, or is it most of the pressure with 2007 and a half to current?
So our certification on the D-Max, we're certified back to 2001. So the same style of tuning that we use on the LML, the L5P to keep the trucks really clean. You put that on an 07 truck, an LDZ or whatever, that truck's going to be, it'll be surprising how much power you can make clean on that truck with the strategy that we use on the LML and newer. It's just a different method than most of the other tuners are using in the business, and that's not criticism on them. It's just not the way I like to operate. And I spent a lot of time designing cals to be very clean, and so I figured, if we're going to get these things certified, let's go back as far as we can, and that makes us safe as a business, to sell all the way back to 01. So we were able to get that certification.
What made me ask you that is there's a lot of diesel truck owners in California that we'll hear from, and they've noticed the marketplace change a lot with products they can't get shipped there anymore. And so they say, hey, I still have to emissions test my 01 or my 06. And they just don't want that headache when they, show up to get their emissions test and something's going on. So I definitely wanted to connect that for those listeners out there that live in those areas. Here in Denver, it's not as strict as California, but there still is snap tests and things all the way back to a 7.3. So you still have to take all that into account. So that should definitely.
D-Max guys, I mean, certainly, we're there for you. The Dodge, I don't think we got we didn't get the 5.9 stuff yet. So still working on that one. And the Ford, we don't tune anything newer than 6.7 liter, which is DPF-equipped anyway. So.
Well, it was
good question.
It was fantastic to catch up with you, Nick. It's always really insightful to be able to to learn more about tuning. I appreciate the information you guys put out there on videos and podcasts and things like that that really address, I think, a lot of the common questions that people have. So it was fantastic to learn a little bit more and rattle off some questions to you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Anybody listening, knowledge is power. I want an educated customer. So if you want to learn more about tuning, I do a whole class on HP Academy. It costs some money, but it's really good. If you want to check out DuramaxTuner.com or Calibrated Power or our YouTube channels, I'd certainly appreciate it too. And it's been a pleasure, Patrick. You're doing a great show, man. Keep up the good work.
Forget diesel fans, make sure and head on over to our Discord. You'll find a link down below if you're not on there. I want to see you guys over there. I want to know what you guys are doing with builds this winter, getting ready for next year. If you have questions about your trucks, I love seeing what you guys are talking about, and also being able to bring our vendors, there are different vendors in and sponsors and people in the industry to that platform to answer your questions. Or, you guys provide awesome feedback with things that I should ask on an episode, or even topic suggestions. And that's where we get a lot of our inspiration, is just directly from you guys and what you want to know. And also, if you'd like to support the podcast, we do have a Patreon link as well with exclusive perks that you won't find anywhere else. There's episodes we don't release on YouTube, podcast apps. We have some things coming up to be able to have your truck be the podcast cover for a month. You can be an executive producer for an episode. So it's really awesome to see you guys there. And one of the things we do is on our shout outs. I want to give a shout out to Texas Diesel Supply and Wrights Diesel Services. We appreciate their support, and also our other members on not just Patreon, but Discord. Those of you that listen on YouTube, podcast apps, love seeing your comments and knowing what you guys are working on out there in Diesel Nation. Until next time, keep the shiny side up.